I had somebody tell me I was retained in the 7th grade, and somebody told me, man, if you fail again, you might as well drop out. And the more I went through school,
so you failed?
The less I failed 7th grade.
This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
There will still be the journey.
The journey.
New sheriff in town, and his name is
The Journey.
Journey.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is The Journey.
The journey.
What is it that moved you?
The Journey. The Journey. The Journey. The Journey.
Welcome back to another episode of The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we got a Memphis icon that I think you'll appreciate. But first, let's go to our quote. The quote is from the great Frederick Douglass, activist, civil rights activist to be exact. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. What does that mean to me? That means that if we ain't struggling, we're not moving forward. There's a certain level of payment that you have to make to have progress. And progress is not going to be easy. Success is not a linear event. You're going to bump your head, you're going to fall down, you're going to skin your knees, but yet and still, if you keep moving forward, you're going to make it. But today, this brother is the personification of perseverance. Father, Memphis born, Memphis bred, Tresvant High School, pastor, youth pastor to be exact. Listen, man, without any further ado, we got brother Chris Watson. What's up, man? Should I say pastor? Pastor Chris Watson.
I like to use the term director, minister, but whatever. I go by a lot of different names, so I'm good.
All right, now you straight out of North Memphis.
Absolutely. So
tell us about the life. Tell us about the early years at the first house that you remember.
It was an apartment, actually, and to be honest, man, I remember good times.
Good times.
It was on J.W. Williams Lane.
Wait a minute, you talking about Good Times, the show? Moving on?
It was almost like Good Times because you had, we were on J.W. Williams Lane in Memphis, and right across the street was Corn School, Corns Elementary, and so that's where I went to school. In my early years, and I was talking to it's funny you mentioned that because I was talking to my brother about it yesterday. My mom and dad split up early.
Oh.
Yeah, and so.
Hold on, don't go too far. We're gonna do that in the second part.
Yeah.
So in the household, in the apartment, there was you, your mom.
My brothers, I had two brothers.
Okay, so it's three of you guys. Okay, outside of your parents, outside of your mother and father, who had the biggest impact on young Chris Watson?
You mean throughout my whole life?
Yeah, you can do your whole life if you like.
Man, I would have to say Pastor Verzola Law.
Really?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt, man. I don't think I would even be sitting here in front of you, honestly.
Really?
I can honestly say that. Yeah.
Now, what did she do what did she do that made the change with Chris Watson?
She heard me. She gave me a voice at a time where I really didn't know what God was doing in my life.
Okay.
And she listened and she gave me direction.
Wow.
And she took the time to walk. She has this incredible way of walking with people that I've never seen, like, without a shadow of a doubt, anybody do.
Okay.
And so she walked me to a level of maturity and challenged me in such a way that I had never been challenged before, but also showed a level of patience that I had never seen before.
Wow.
And so if I had to name anybody, it would definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, is her.
Shout out to Verzola Law.
Absolutely. Incredible human being.
All right.
Incredible.
How different are you from the person you dreamed as a young person you'd be? Why you laughing?
I definitely didn't see myself being, especially when I was younger, I expected, I wanted to be a rapper and all of this stuff and own a chain of stores. And I envisioned it different.
Okay.
Because that was what was popular.
Okay.
And I was really good at writing.
Right.
Writing songs. And so that's what I thought. That's what I envisioned myself being.
What's the name of the group?
Working with young people. Mercenary Mob is the
Mercenary Mob.
Yeah. Mercenary Mob.
Got the alliteration going and everything.
Right. And so it was good, man. It was a way to express myself.
Okay.
but I never really got the platform to utilize those gifts and those talents the way that I wanted to. Probably did a little studio time here and there,
Right.
talent show here and there, but that was pretty much it. But I did not envision being a minister, working with kids, working in the community. None of that was on the radar at all.
All right. What decision did you make as a young person that ended up having a lifelong impact? Although you didn't know it at the time, it would.
At a young person, probably give my life to Christ.
Okay.
Probably giving my life to Christ. I don't think I knew.
What age were you?
14.
You were 14 when you gave your life to Christ?
Yeah.
And when you say gave your life to Christ, does that mean you walked up to the front of the church and said, I believe in Jesus Christ and now you can baptize me? Or was it another sort of exchange?
Well, it was, my father had just passed.
Okay.
And so I really felt like there was a void that needed to be filled.
Okay.
And that was a God-sized hole. And so I didn't know of anything else, or couldn't find anything else that would really fill that void.
Okay.
But God. And so saying yes to God meant that I was on a rediscovery of who I was after my father passed.
Well, see, on the second segment, we're going to find out who introduced you to God. So when did you know you were going to be okay? When did Chris Watson, and you can take your whole life, and say, and when could you look in the mirror and say, I can do this thing called life. I think I can do this.
Well, I think that probably happened around about maybe 28, 29 years old.
Okay.
And once again, my father passing had a tremendous impact on my life.
Right.
I stayed mad for a long time. And I had a dream that I was still at the graveyard. And I saw myself standing there as a child.
Right.
And that's when I woke up and kind of realized that it was time to move on.
Okay.
And I was grieving without knowing that I was grieving for that long.
I got you.
And so I really began to look at my life and say, you know what, you got to start living at some point. And even if you don't know what all of that means, I think that now you're in a community of people that can help you with that.
Okay. Okay.
And so if I was going to have a shot at having family, having friends, real friends, then I needed to make a decision to move on at that time.
Quick question. What's your why? Why you get up every day?
I'm a father.
Okay. That'll do it.
I'm a father, and I get such joy out of being a father.
Okay.
I have 3 daughters. 2 are older, and they're in their late 20s. I have one that's 11. Okay. That 11-year-old challenged me in ways that
can't even
I
imagine.
can't even understand. She came at the right time, and she always brings out certain elements of me that I didn't know was there.
I got you.
Yeah.
Last question. Most young brothers know that moment. But can you tell me the moment when you realized you was a black man?
Man, black man. I remember.
Hold on for a second. Listen, we're going to be right back on the journey. Pastor Chris Watson is going to share with us when he realized that he was a brother. Stay right there. We'll be right back on the journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network. remember, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. We have today Brother Chris Watson sharing with us what makes him a Memphis icon. But before we left, we were talking about when he realized he was a black man. Brother Watson?
It's crazy. I think like I was back at Tresman High School.
Okay.
And me and my buddies, we used to stop at the store and get snacks after school.
Right.
And I remember I always had money. We always had money.
Right.
That was just a daily routine. And I was in the candy section, just looking at candy. And the store clerk, the manager, walked up and said, "Is that my gum you chewing in your mouth?" And I was like, "What?" He was like, "Is that my gum you chewing in your mouth?" And I had this gum in my mouth since third period. And mind you, all I did was walk in the store, go straight to the candy section and got ready to select my purchase.
Right.
And I kind of was indignant, you know. I was like that. I said, why are you asking me that? I said, I've had this candy in my mouth all day. I said, I'm trying to see what I'm gonna buy. And he was like, "Get out of my store." And he just put me out the store for no reason. I didn't know why he approached me in that manner.
Right.
But I knew it was because I was black.
Right.
I knew it was because of how I looked. I knew it was, you know, for no other reason than I was a black male.
Right.
And he felt like doing that day.
We're going to rewind it all the way back. North Memphis. Give me a time that you remember your two other brothers, your mom, and your dad. And what was that experience like? What was that exchange like? What comes to mind?
It was a very unhealthy dynamic.
Why unhealthy? That's a good word.
Because by the time I came along, you got to remember my brothers are much older than me.
Okay.
So my brothers are in their late 50s.
Okay.
And there was about 10 years between me and my youngest older brother.
Oh, gotcha.
So by the time I came along, they were pretty much on the skirts with each other. And so the marriage was pretty much dissolving at that time.
Okay.
So as a kid, I didn't really experience all the unhealthiness that was in there, but the tension was still there. So much so that my mom decided, you know, it's time for us to pack up and move. And so she took me and one of my brothers with her, while my oldest brother stayed with my dad. Okay. And I didn't know much at the time. I just knew that something was going on. But what I didn't like our new place at all. Okay. I didn't like it at all.
Wait a minute, hold on. So you said unhealthy. Define unhealthy, unpack unhealthy for the listener.
So unhealthy is when there is not cohesiveness in the household, where there's always tension. The two parents are not on the same page. You don't see the affection, you don't see the love, you don't see the family time, the family dynamic. I didn't see much of that growing up. My mother and father, too, great human beings, but coexisting with one another, it was just not happening with them.
Individually great, together a disaster.
Exactly. So it was that type of dynamic, and I understood even at an early age that they were better apart than they were together.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Give me your worst memory as a child.
As a child, my worst memory, it keeps going back to my dad.
Really?
Yeah, it keeps going back to his passing.
Okay. Tell us about that. What was the situation around your dad's passing?
Well, my dad had cancer.
Okay.
And so when he had cancer, I didn't know it. I remember my mom telling me when he had his head shaved and he was going through chemo, she told me he got cancer. And I was like, no, he don't. I told her, and I meant it.
Right.
I wasn't mad about it. I brushed it off. I didn't see it.
Right.
And I took trips to the hospital. I saw that, his health was declining. I saw him the day before he passed. And even though I looked at him in his frailty, I didn't see it.
When did you realize he was gone? The finality of it?
When my family the next day, when he passed, the day he passed, my family was standing around me. I was sitting in a chair. And they were about to break the news with me, but when they were standing up, like all of it just hit me at once. I was like, wow.
Wow.
Because as a father, he was like my rock, for real. I didn't fear anything. I felt protected. I felt insured. I felt covered. So when he passed, it was like, wow, I'm uncovered.
You mentioned that you're a father, and that was your why.
Right.
How has your dad's passing and the impact he had on you, how has that affected your relationships with your daughters?
It has made me be very intentional about parenting. My dad wasn't intentional about parenting. He just parented.
Right.
He set the blueprint for what a man should do: provide, protect, cultivate.
Right.
And in doing that, I just realized that I couldn't give my daughters any less.
Right.
And so the intentionality of parenting, of being a father, I go the extra mile to make sure and consider them not only just being my children, but their own personalities and being girls and, developing into women in this world, Black women at that.
Right.
And so my dad, the foundation he laid for me was basically provide, protect, and cultivate. Cover your children.
Right.
Provide for them, care for them, love them as best you can.
Right.
And that's it.
Awesome. Awesome. Give me a fond memory of your childhood.
Growing up in North Memphis was cool, man.
Okay.
Even though my parents did split up, I spent the majority of my days because I was going to school in North Memphis. Mm-hmm. And so it was right across the street from my dad's apartment. And so I would go directly home after school. And it was fun. Right. It was fun. You have this term that they call the hood now. Back then it was the ghetto. You know? And they call it the hood because the neighbor has fallen off.
Right.
And like our people have,
say that again.
they call it the hood because the neighbor has fallen off. The people back then were so neighborly.
Right.
And I'm talking about for streets over. The whole neighborhood knew you. And they watched out for you. What we call today snitching, back then they called it looking out for you because it was in your own best interest. If we did more of what they call snitching today, our kids would still be around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, man, just fun times. The neighbors looked out for you. The kids all hung out together. Mm-hmm. And we stayed out late, man. We stayed out past dark, and people were secure in knowing that the kids were safe because the neighborhood was safe.
You went to Tresvant.
I did.
When did you come out of Tresvant?
In 95.
Okay. Mm-hmm. 95. Did you go on to college after you left Tresvant?
I actually left school in 95. I left school.
Oh, you didn't graduate?
Mm-mm. I left school.
Oh, you just
95.
said I'm up out of his piece.
Yeah, I was just, man, there's this saying that went around when I was in school that school ain't for everybody.
Right.
And I found out that meant post-secondary.
That meant college. Right. It didn't mean high school.
It didn't mean high school or elementary school,
right,
you know what I'm saying? But you had that going around in my day.
Okay.
I had somebody tell me I was retained in the 7th grade, and somebody told me, man, if you fail again, you might as well drop out. And the more I went through school,
you failed?
The less I failed 7th grade.
Oh, wow.
School was not once again, I didn't have that dynamic that made me stay on. And that's another thing that I do with my own child is I make sure that she's educated. Because I have a passion for education now. And I think that if somebody had just been on me enough to fuel that, stir that up in me, then I would have succeeded.
Now that's surprising because not only are you an excellent writer and speaker,
Right.
I just always assumed that you had gone on to college and had graduated and done your thing.
Right.
But I guess there's a reason why they call you Straight Street.
Absolutely.
Now, why they call you Straight Street?
So Straight Street came from my first sermon.
Okay.
It was an introduction by Dr. Valerie Bridgman Davis.
Okay.
She was telling them all of the stuff I did with ministry and all of that. She said, but more than anything, he's just straight street. Like you're not gonna get a whole lot of church vernacular out of this guy. He's just straight from the streets. But the interesting dynamic about that was with that name, which kind of caught on, everybody referred to me as Straight Street.
Right.
The original call or my original prompt to youth ministry or get involved with the youth came from a young man that was killed at Westside High School from a gang initiation.
Oh.
And I didn't realize it at the time. It felt like sitting on a nail. I had to do something. I had to do something to work with these youth. And I didn't know, I knew I wasn't gonna solve the world's problem, but I knew that I had to do my part. And I remember that young man to this day because had that not happened, I would have not been prompted to do what I do today. And
do you remember the young man's name?
Years later, I went and checked out the news article and found out his name. And it is crazy because it kind of correlates with this Straight Street name.
Okay.
His name was Taurus.
Okay.
It's Taurus Williams. And in the Bible, Saul, who had a conversion to Paul, his name was Saul of Tarsus.
Oh.
And so when Jesus encountered him, he said, I want you to go to the house of Judas on Straight Street. And it was amazing for me to find out that this young man's name was Taurus and that whole connection with Straight Street, because had that guy had not been killed, because you always want to find the seed of the benefit in any bad situation. And so Taurus' life was not in vain because it helped me to impact the lives of so many other young people. But the fact that his name was Taurus and I was put on the road to Straight Street to have this transformation in my own life is incredible. I owe him and his life a debt of gratitude. Yeah.
I thought that was a young name.
No.
But
it was after my conversion, I guess it was.
When you left Tresvant,
Uh-huh.
What was that day like? You just said, I quit?
Yeah, I went to the office and said, I've had enough.
You told them in the office?
I told the assistant principal that. I said, because they kept pulling me out of class for stuff.
Okay.
They kept pulling me out of class for cutting. They put me out of class for just a number of things, violations that I did in school. And it was catching all up on me like disciplinary forms and all that. And I was trying to go to class. I was like, I'm going to do right. I'm going to go to class. And they were just getting me on everything, man.
So did anybody, once you said you quit and you walk out of school, no one came to get you?
Nah, I just left. And
what did your mom say?
She said, if that's your decision, then, do it. I told her I had a plan. I told her I was going to go to, adult vocational school. And she said, well, if that's what you want to do, then do it.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So what was that transition like? When you left school, you basically became an adult because you had to begin to take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. So what was the transition to adulthood like?
I had been working since I was 16. So that was very, I knew how to hustle a little bit.
Okay.
And I've always had a hustling instinct ever since I was
hustle, is that slinging? Is that?
Somewhat.
Okay.
But I also did whatever. I remember I was selling romance novels. My mom had some books.
Wait a minute.
Right.
Wait a minute. You out on the street selling novels?
Man, I was going around door to door selling romance novels, and people thought it was so cute. They would just buy them. I was selling them like 50 cents.
Your mom was mad because her books
Yeah,
were
she was
gone.
like, where my books at? I was like, and then I had them in a bag, and they got rained on, and somebody came and put them on the steps. That's how she found out that I was selling them. But I always had some type of hustle instinct in me.
Okay.
And so when I left school, got a job, started working, started hustling.
You fast forward to marriage. At what point did you decide, I got kids, I want a wife, that whole thing?
It just came kind of like with this whole dynamic of trying to get my life together.
Okay.
And I felt like marriage was a part of it.
Okay.
And to be honest, I never knew firsthand what getting your life together consisted of.
Right.
I just knew that I couldn't live like I had been living previously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to do everything that I thought was right.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage was a part of that.
Okay.
Gainful employment, going to school, all of those things were a part of it. And so that's what I did. I found someone that I felt was marriage material.
But you had 2 daughters prior to being married. How did that work? And you going through a transition, obviously getting married, them going through a transition. What was that dynamic like, and how did that impact you?
Well, I think that it was an adjustment for everybody.
Okay.
It was an adjustment for everybody. My oldest daughter, of course, she was a different story because I adopted her.
Okay.
But my middle daughter was at the time the baby, my only one.
Right.
And I don't think she was vibing that well with, she's 13 and then all of a sudden here comes somebody talking about they the new baby. I don't think she was vibing with that as well. And so it was a stretch for everybody.
Okay.
And you think that you're gonna you come on in and be a part of this family. I didn't realize how much, I never saw it coming. I didn't know how much of a struggle that would actually be.
When did you know it was over? It was time to call it quits in your marriage?
I would say when it wasn't healthy for either one of us.
Did you recall times with your mother and father in the situation you were in?
Yep.
Is that what made you be able to say, okay, yeah, this ain't?
Yeah. When the house gets too cold, you gotta roll.
Got it.
You gotta roll because at the end of the day, we still have work to do.
Right.
We still have work to do. And because we have that work to do, I want to be able to salvage as much as I can for the work ahead.
What's your greatest success, Chris?
My greatest success, I would say, is once again being a father.
Okay. Where does being a pastor rank in there? How does, when you made that transition?
It's probably maybe third on my list.
Oh.
I can say that one of the greatest accomplishments I've ever had is taking care of my mom. That probably out of everything, if I did a million other, things, got a million other accolades, taking care of my mom was probably the best thing that I've ever done because family is important to me.
Right.
Family is very important to me. That's what I do everything else for. It's tied to family. You can, a direct line to my calling from God and family.
Calling from God, real quickly. Tell us the moment that you got that calling.
When I was walking through my apartment building one night and they said, I asked myself, how could I get more out of life? I was just talking to myself and I heard God say, if you want more out of life, you have to give me more. That's when I got my calling. I sat down long enough to begin to hear God give me direction for my life.
If you could talk to that kid, yourself. Go back to North Memphis. He's sitting there eating a bowl of cereal. You pull up a chair across the table from him. What would you say to that guy?
Believe in yourself.
Believe in yourself.
Yep. Don't let anybody tell you differently. You're gonna run into a lot of people who's gonna try to change you, tell you what you need to do. They're gonna try to get you to conform. Don't conform. Your success is being yourself.
All right. There's many young men that are watching and listening. For those that are watching, I'd like you to look in that camera and leave them with a straight streetism that they can carry from this moment that they've been listening to you.
Straight streetism.
Straight there, right there in that camera.
I would just tell young men that you have to protect your self-image at all costs. You can live no higher than your self-image. I've always come back to the idea that I was made in the image of God. That's the definition of which my self-image, that's the premise of what my self-image is built on. You can look at other people and you can look at their lives and you can want to emulate them, but you have to be aware. You have to know that you were made in the image of God, that you were fearfully and wonderfully made, that there's nobody walking this earth that's just like you. And so as long as you keep comparing yourself to other people, that's image suicide. You have to understand, you have to be aware, you have to remember that you're made in the image of God.
Awesome, awesome. Listen, you've heard it all. From Straight Street, Pastor Chris Watson, Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church. Check him out. You've listened to, or you've been watching The Journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network. And we are committed to bringing you individuals that will help you see that life success is not a linear event. You're going to fall down, but you got to get up. As the old saying goes, you fall down 7, get up 8.
Right.
So, I'm your host, Larry Robinson. For Pastor Chris Watson, you've been watching The Journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Till next time. Thank you to our partner, the Grand Boulé of Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity, Delta Chapter. To hear more incredible stories like this, be sure to download the KUDZUKIAN app from the App Store or Google Play, or check out the Journey Memphis podcast on all your major podcast providers. Also, check us out on the KUDZUKIAN Network.